fantasy, but it's a fantasy now a great deal nearer to being realized than I thought than it certainly was at that time. And it seems to me perfectly on the cards that there will be within the next generation or so a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and of producing a kind of producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will actually rather enjoy it because they will be distracted from their any desire to rebel by the fact of propaganda, brainwashing, enhanced possibly by pharmacological methods. And this seems to me to be precisely the final revolution.
Hey there, me again. Thanks for joining me again. This is a return visit, and thanks for joining me for the first time. It's the first time visit. I just wanted to do a quick introduction here on a video here it's a video about SARS-CoV-2, but primarily focused on mandatory masking. And the fact that they're, from the data perspective, that's being used by pretty much everybody, governments included, and the talking heads, and the people who are yelling and screaming at others for wearing their masks. There is nothing to support mandatory masks. So we're going to explore that. This is just the introduction. I just want to put a face on the video, and we're underway. So I hope you enjoy. It's kind of long. This is the long version full. This may also be part of the introduction of I might cut it up into chunks. I'm not sure, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, thanks for joining me. You get your eyes on the screen versus screen. Have a great day. I hope you enjoy. Thanks. Okay, so basically what I've got here is a presentation that I did, just helps keep things organized. We're going to examine overall. So actually, I'm not even going to start rambling, because when I do, I'll get off track. So basically, my intention here with this presentation is an analysis angle. So that's the tone, if you will. It's not a social commentary or examination of society and people. It's an analysis, so it's data. So even though the numbers we're going to talk about do represent people, for the purposes of this presentation and this video, it's a statistical analysis, so let's put it that way. That's the angle we need to cover here. So I am not without empathy towards any and all. I have not met a person with any sort of issues with SARS-CoV-2. I know of a couple indirectly, and that's all. I've asked many other people, and I'm not the only one asking. There are many, many, many others. If you spend some time on the interweb nets there, you'll come across, no doubt, many people asking the same questions, and generally the same answers, either nobody or one or two, which is kind of odd. But nonetheless, I'm certainly not without empathy towards any and all who may have suffered and or perished throughout whatever this is, and so I just want that to be known, because again, we're doing a statistical analysis. It may come across as cold and callous, but that's not my intent at all. We are an analytical presentation, and that's what we're after. So we need to set the emotion a little bit aside. And I'll right off the get-go, let you know, anybody who's watching any of my other videos or listening to me even talk, I tend to get off track. So as I wander around a little bit, I guess like a path through the woods kind of thing, I do try to keep my eye on the prize. And so eventually we will get to the point, and the point will be outlined in a couple of slides forward here. The other little thing right off the get-go, kind of a housekeeping thing, is for whatever reason I use LibreOffice Impress, and my spell checker's not working in Impress, so all of this is done kind of by sight. So if there are some typos and stuff in there, I apologize ahead of time, because I'm now used to using a spell checker that kind of takes care of things for me. So I tried to get them all. I tried to cut and paste into a notepad that does have a spell checker, so hopefully I've got most of them, but I'm sure there are a couple that slipped on through. So my approach here is what I'm looking is basically cards on the table, as the slide says, straight up. We're sometimes verbally unfiltered, not from a cursing point of view. I try to keep that down to a dull roar. But we're at the point now where pulling punches is not doing us any good. So it's going to be kind of a call it as I see it, and decorum is going to be a little bit shorter in supply here. I'm not going to dance around the issues. We've got some things to deal with. We've got some groups of individuals who are causing problems against that, trying to solve our own problems, so on and so forth. So anyway, we are going to, or I am going to try to keep it straight up and on the table. As always, I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. That's your own job to convince yourself personally. I just want to present facts, figures, angles, my own personal opinion, all of that kind of stuff. But fact and truth, as in the slide there, they do their own convincing. I don't need to do any sort of convincing. But that's, again, never my goal. My goal is just to present, and it's up to you to decide, one way or the other, or something completely different. That's your choice and your right to choose. So my motivation here with any of this stuff that I'm doing, not just the SARS-CoV stuff, but the society in general, banking, economics, libertarianism, monetary system reform, and other various gobbledygoo that we get into with society and stuff, I make no money off it. I will potentially look at maybe a Patreon or something in the near future just to help with some costs, but all of this is born out of my own pocket. It's my own time, and really the only thing I stand to gain is my own liberty and the liberty of my friends and family and their friends and family and so on and so forth. So the reality is I actually stand to lose a bit here by doing these type of things. So I just want to put that out as a motivation. It's not a pay thing. It's not a commercial. It's not a career. I'm not even interested in doing this kind of stuff. As I mentioned before, this public speaking kind of thing and the presentation and video stuff is way out of my wheelhouse. I'm just not interested in it whatsoever. So this is done strictly as a moral kind of thing. I do it, for myself, like we all should be doing, but I'm also doing it for my friends and family and their children and kin, as it were. The other little thing on the bottom there, I don't enjoy the spotlight or center of attention. I actually really don't do that. It's not really my wheelhouse. Again, it's my new word of the month is wheelhouse. So overall, when it comes to COV, let's get right into it then. My particular position, so that any bias that may be out is exposed here right off the get-go before we get going. So just read off the slide here. Whatever SARS-CoV-2 is or turns out to be, the government response and media hype have been monstrously overblown and overhyped, and that I have said right from the get-go back in March, and nothing has changed. It's actually just reinforced that same position. It's just been way overblown, overhyped. And secondly, then, I'm advocating, as always, for not having our liberty and right to choose infringed upon. And that's it. Bottom line, you should have the right to choose in anything and everything. And again, the four little things when you're looking at libertarianism and the non-aggression principle, that kind of thing, is it's basically do not commit violence against another, do not threaten to commit violence against another, don't steal their stuff, and don't wreck their stuff. Again, it's pretty straightforward. But that also includes the choices, right? By having the choice, you can't, your coercion and forcing me to choose and to actually taking the right to choose away from me. So it's infringing on it. You don't have the right to grant it from a government perspective, but they do infringe upon it pretty regularly. So we need to fight and keep on going. Anyone who wants to wear a mask or any other, I guess the PPE, is that the word there? Personal protection equipment, whatever such measures, should also have the liberty to do so as well. Do what you want. Again, as long as you're not encroaching, because you don't have the right to do that in those four areas I just mentioned. But beyond that, away we go. And then the last here is whether SARS-CoV-2 is or is not a virus, is or not a natural thing, was or was not intentionally released, and so upon, and so on. These are just topics for another day. They're outside the scope of this presentation. So the goal with this presentation is to, via some rustic data analysis, meaning don't do this as a profession, so this is just something I've picked up over the years as a computer security and troubleshooter and kind of thing like that, networking and stuff. You tend to do some data analysis. So I have some basic skills in it. I definitely do not profess to be a superstar. I've never had education in it. It's just some basic stuff. So that's my rustic in there. We're going to show that mandatory and compulsory maskery, and by extension physical distancing, the economic and personal lockdowns have no evidence supporting them at all in terms of the mandatory. There is none. But we're going to focus mostly on the masks, since that seems to be the current thing of the day, flavor of the day. But in general, all of this stuff, there is no data supporting the need for the compulsory. Again, if you want to do this, you do it yourself. Not a problem. It shouldn't be. And anybody who gives you grief, well, give them grief back. But don't be forcing your beliefs and thoughts on other people. And that's just, it's always wrong. It's never right. The ends justify the means. You know, I was thinking about that too, as to whether there are actually some cases where the ends justify the means. There's probably some solid arguments to make for it. I don't know. Again, another day. But definitely not here, for sure. And then just to reiterate what the stated reason for, and this is basically from government mouthpiece and from basically all the people who are pushing and shoving this whole idea, is that it's a public health response, right, intended to stop or severely curtail the spread and or transmission of SARS-CoV-2. That's what they're basing this mandatory masking on. This is, you can see this in any place, any press releases, like a media, all of that stuff is reiterated basically the same idea. And so the interesting part here is, whether it actually works or not. But we're going to find out whether it works. So there's some various considerations we have to take a look into as we're going along. So we've got this as kind of a pre-flight checklist, kind of before we get going. Just some pitfalls and some points before we start looking at the actual, at some data. We're just going to kind of go through a few little items here. So this is an article from Mises.org. Just quickly read through here. It talks about numbers and how we focus on number. And so as we can see today with the, the way the media is presenting it and the way it's being presented generally across the board, even from people who are just talking to each other, it's like a scoreboard. It's much like the weather report, and we'll show you a picture there of one later on where that's exactly how it comes across. Anyway, enough of me. It is unlikely that pundits, politicians, and the general public have ever been so obsessed with numbers as they are right now. I speak, of course, of the numbers surrounding deaths and illness attributed to COVID-19. For months now, every new day has brought new headlines about total COVID-19 infections, total deaths, and estimates put out by models claiming to predict how many deaths will soon occur. These numbers have become the focal point of many politicians' careers. This is especially true for state governors and other politicians in executive positions, who now in this time of emergency essentially rule by decree. New edicts are regularly issued by the policymakers, allegedly based on an assessment of the all-important numbers. These decrees may unilaterally close businesses, cut people off from important medical procedures, ban religious gatherings, or even attempt to confine people to their homes. Those who refuse to comply may have their livelihoods destroyed. The number becomes the standard by which all behavior is judged. Will activity X increase the number or decrease it? For those who wish to engage in activity Z, they must first prove that they will not increase the number. Nothing shall be allowed that doesn't have a good effect on the number. And so this is where we end up with the number. But there's a problem with this way of doing things. The number in question only tells us about one thing being measured. If we only have a number for one thing, then we tend to ignore all the other things that aren't being assigned a number. Now, when it comes to the SARS-CoV-2 stuff, there are many, 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 many other things. So I'm not going to get into all of them because it's, again, the ripples in a pond and how interconnected a human is with all the other humans in their environment around them. But one we can look at that's fairly straightforward and easy is how the media keeps running that total tally of cases, right? So it's always the total number, and that's right at the top. So it's a great big number, and it's right there in your face. But they're, almost just pay lip service to the ones that are resolved or recovered. So the reality is, if you are going to communicate effectively without the drama and all the other, shenanigans going on, the only two numbers you need are the active, which is the total amount minus the resolved or recovered, and fatal. That's it. Those two numbers are the only ones that are important. Why we keep jamming these big, huge numbers, there's a reason for that. It's obvious, because they're very dramatic, and they hit home there. They instill more fear. In terms of Canada, 100,000 looks a lot bigger than 4, right? So this is what happens, and this is why we get this thing going. But try to do that. Try to, when you're looking at these dumb numbers that they show in the media and all that, try to look at don't focus on the total running tally. Focus on the ones that are active, because that means those are the, subtracting the recovery, because you should already have a number in there for fatalities. So the active and the fatal are the only two that really have any sort of inclination. And that would be the same, I would imagine, for anything, for even if you're looking at the flu or the cold or measles or whatever. It doesn't really matter so much the ones who have recovered. That's not, the total count. That's for statisticians later on. Boy, oh boy, when I read this Sunday morning or Saturday morning, I'm having a hard time here. Anyway, just try to keep that in mind as we're going. Here's a little example here of how, what is that? That's just outside. That's not your end. It's my end. So, but look at how this is presented here. It's like a scorecard here. It's like some sort of sports thing or a weather report or something like that. But notice how they get that going in those numbers, right? Total cases. Did it say anything in here? So look at what it does there. New cases and total cases. Nothing to do with recovered, right? So if you took the new cases, this is Waterloo Region. With total cases, if you took them down, you'd end up with a very small number, and we'll see later, a very small number in terms of the ones that are actually a problem. But this, of course, keeps the whole thing in fear motivating, right? 1,300 and 29 there looks a whole lot more than 100. And that's exactly it. So anyway, we'll keep on going.
Oh, hi, Mom. No, I told you I'd call you when I got home. I'm not home yet. All right, I'm home. The Arctic expedition was a remarkable success. I'm all but certain there's a Nobel Prize in my future. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm entirely certain. No, Mother, I could not feel your church group praying for my safety. The fact that I'm home safe does not prove that it worked. That logic is post hoc ergo propter hoc. No, I'm not sassing you in Eskimo talk.
So another item here from the critical thinking, as pointed out by quickly by Sheldon there. Basically, correlation does not imply causation. If there's anything you take away from this presentation, it is this one here. And use this not just here, but everywhere in your life. You will be astounded and amazed how often we kind of put a couple of things together. We look at a little pattern of one, and then basically, oh, that's it. But this is not the case. So in statistics, the phrase correlation does not imply causation refers to the inability to legitimately deduce a cause and effect relationship between two variables solely on the basis of an observed association or correlation between them. So don't freak out here and it's all wordy, but there's a couple of examples here after that shows it exactly what it means. The idea that correlation implies causation is an example of a questionable cause logical fallacy in which two events occurring together are taken to have established a cause and effect relationship. This fallacy is also known by the Latin phrase cum hoc ergo propter hoc, which is with this, therefore because of this. And this differs from the fallacy known, what Sheldon was talking about, post hoc ergo propter hoc, after this, therefore because of this, in which an event following another is seen as a necessary consequence of the former event. So we're going to focus more on the cause and effect, and the correlation does not imply causation. So the idea is that just because there are indicators that can correlate with an idea, a concept, or something else, doesn't necessarily mean they are the cause of that something or something else. So if we go, the cause and effect here is the other side of that coin, is what we're going to look at. And then, of course, the slighter definition here just gets a little bit more in tune here, the definitions of correlation, the state or relation of being correlated, the act of correlating. But I just want to get this in here so we're all kind of talking the same term. Causality, a causal quality or agency. Why do they make these? You need a dictionary actually to look up the definitions of other dictionary words. It's kind of, well, cause and effect? No, it's a circular thingy. The relation between a cause and effect or between regularly correlated events or phenomenon. Okay, and so here we go. U.S. spending on science, space, and technology is red. Suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocate is black. See there? But there really is not going to be any connection. So the idea is that because the U.S. spends more money is not going to be the cause of suicides by hanging and strangulation going up. And reversely, or conversely, suicides by hanging going up is not going to cause, or be the cause of U.S. spending on science, space, and technology. Number of people who drown by falling into a pool versus and correlates with the films that Nicolas Cage has appeared in, right? So it's just, again, you can see how these things correlate, but they're clearly no connection. Age of Miss America correlates with murders by steam, hot vapors, and hot objects, right? And we can see that correlation, but we know, full well that there's going to be really no connection. I mean, who knows? Maybe there could be. We need some scientific verification on that. But there's a real good chance that the age of Miss America is not going to be a cause or correlation or a connection with murders by steam, hot vapor, and objects. So there we go. We need that correlation does not imply causation, and just think of cause and effect and how those two things can be two utterly different things. Just because you see an effect does not necessarily mean that that particular thing or that particular thing is the cause. We need to do some scientific study, or at least some scientific style observation type of thing. So like in the tech industry, when you're trying to troubleshoot, particularly software, But in many cases, you can just do it. It is software, but it's in the bigger picture. So, for example, it may not be your application. It may be the operating system, so on and so forth. But when you're testing those things, what you do, generally speaking, is you change one thing and test. Then you change one thing and test. Then you change one. It is tedious, time-consuming, and laborious, but it's the only way to know one way or